ARPA E is the Advanced Research Projects Agency for the Department of Energy and was founded in 2009. Since then, it's funded more than 1,000 high-risk, high-reward projects. Jennifer Gerbi is the agency's acting director. Jennifer, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, so ARPA E has been around for around 13 years. What was the motivation for its creation?
There were two motivations for its creation. One is R&D competitiveness in the United States, and that's something that came about in the American Reinvestment Act in 2009. But also we knew that there were energy problems that needed to be solved for the country. And that really goes to our mission, which is around things like reducing imports, increasing efficiency, and reducing energy-related emissions. So there's also a climate aspect to it as well.
You know, there are a lot of these ARPA model agencies, starting with DARPA for defense. There's IARPA for intelligence. There's now the new ARPA H for health. What's so appealing about that model?
You know, it's very difficult to do research and work that's very high risk because a lot of it is by necessity going to fail. If it doesn't fail, it means you haven't gone high risk enough. It's very difficult to do that within a traditional setup, within a traditional agency. There's a lot of agencies that have very defined problems. They're working on incremental research, which is very important. But in order to swing to the fences and to be able to take on things that aren't going to work, you have to have a special kind of culture where that risk is accepted and you are allowed to do things that you wouldn't be able to do anywhere else. And it involves a fair amount of trust in the agency to be able to do that. And that's why the ARPA model, I think, has been so successful, is because it allows for people to do that.
So what's unique about ARPA E, besides the subject matter, which is energy?
Well, we're relatively small and new compared to somebody like DARPA. And, you know, we have a particularly, special model on that we're all on term limits. We come for 3 to 5 years, and then we go on to the next thing. We're run by a core of empowered program directors, and we all work together pretty seamlessly to pressure test ideas, figure out what to pitch to the agency. It's a pretty involved process to decide what we should do. And we are still really quite small, and that means we can be a very cohesive bunch. And we can all be in one room together, which again it's something pretty special.
And are you together often? Do you guys collaborate? Do you share notes?
We do. And one of the special things about the agency is when you have term limits like this, there's no competition. I mean, there's no promotions, there's no reason to compete, and there's a sense of urgency. I mean, you came because you believe in the mission, you're very passionate about the problem you want to solve, and you only have 3 to 5 years to do it. That's not very much time. So because of that sense of urgency as well, we all work together, and it is a pretty amazing place.
Well, let's talk about the money, because ARPA E awards funding through 2 different models. One is called the focused model. So how does that work? How do you decide what research areas you want to focus on?
So that's really the core of what goes on at the agency. And so that's where an individual program director decides what problem should be solved and why, and what should that solution look like. And you can spend up to a year talking with everybody under the sun, trying to figure out, is this actually the right thing to do? We pressure test it at multiple points. We have things like forward-facing workshops, and we put out requests for information. Again, we're constantly pressure testing everybody's ideas, and at the end of the day, that goes to a pitch to the agency for a certain amount of money. And then that is how a focused program moves forward. And we put out a funding announcement. You can see them all on our Exchange site, and they're really quite detailed in terms of here's the metrics that need to be met, both on the technical and the market side, for there to be impact from solving this problem.
There's the open model. So what kind of projects would apply for funding through that?
So every 3 years, we open the doors and we say, all right, anybody who has an idea that fits our mission, apply to the agency. It's for an agency who's so small, dealing with getting 3,500 applications is really quite something. But it enables us to say, oh, here's areas that, we had no idea existed, or, solutions in a space where we don't have focused models. It really helps introduce people to the agency, and it really is a blast to see the kind of ideas that come in. So that's every 3 years. We do also do an SBIR seedling, sort of a $500,000 grant. Once a year, we'll probably do those more often. So we do have other opportunities that are open in terms of people applying to the agency.
So do you get some really crazy stuff?
We get some really crazy stuff. Every time we have an open FOA, we say, all right, how many perpetual motion machines do we have? There's always at least one. There's some people who apply with the same exact thing every single time, but you know what? More power to them. I love the fact that people are sort of pushing boundaries and reaching out and applying to the agency. We never make fun of anything, but we do say there is physics at the end of the day, and so you can always find those.
You've recently awarded funding for projects focused on turning buildings into carbon storage structures. Mm-hmm. What is that? How does that work?
That's a particularly exciting one because there's really two aspects of thinking about energy or carbon in buildings. One is the amount of energy they use. And actually the program I put together when I came to the agency was about trying to use less energy in the buildings. But you can only use so little energy. At the end of the day, there's still a huge amount of carbon involved in the materials you use to make the building and how you make the building. And in order to have a truly carbon neutral building, you have to attack that side of the problem. So this is all about looking at structures and materials and designs that actually end up having either a carbon neutral, even a carbon negative building.
So I guess really the bottom line is, how do you really determine what projects get funded and for how long?
This is something that I think is a special part of the process for us because we go through a pretty detailed review process. We put out this funding announcement. People usually apply with concept papers. They're just 4 pages long. Those are either encouraged or discouraged. We have internal reviews, external reviews. Then people send in their full applications, which are quite involved. Again, we have internal reviews, external reviews. We convene in person an external review panel to talk about these things. The program director gets all of this information, and then they are empowered to build a portfolio of what they think will best fit the needs of the program. We're not limited to what scores applications got or anything like that. A lot of times we're looking for technical diversity in terms of how many shots on goal can we take here, how many different technical pathways. And so that program director builds the portfolio. We then move forward with cooperative agreements with these teams, which are things that can be changed at any time. Sometimes they're shut down, sometimes they're plussed up.
Jennifer, what is ARPA E's role once a project is awarded funding? How hands-on are you?
We have something called substantial involvement, which sounds like, yeah, we're pretty hands-on. We have quarterly reviews with every single one of our projects. Sometimes we visit them in person, sometimes we don't. But we're going through all of the details of the work plan we put together. We have milestones, again, technical and market. We work very closely with our teams. We do everything we can to help them. And we'll go through the data with them. We'll go through their pitch decks. We work very closely. And I think that's really important because sometimes ideas need to pivot because a certain approach won't work, or it might need to be changed entirely. So we're very flexible, but we can be because we work so closely with the teams.
So part of what you do is to make sure that those technology, that research that you're funding gets to market. How do you do that?
That is tricky because a lot of times there isn't the most attractive market for, energy efficiency technologies, let's say. So we work with our teams to try to maybe identify a first market that has additional value so they can at least move forward and get the technology out there. Sometimes that might be a defense market, for example. We did find that there were a number of our teams that really did have challenges moving forward. And we actually started another kind of program called Scale Up that's open to current or former ARPA E awardees to try to help them get to the next step, to sort of further validate, de-risk technologies out of the lab in a size that actually matters to investors and to get it to move forward. And that's really been a pretty resounding success, and we're very happy about it. So we will do anything to try to get impact. Honestly, at the end of the day, that's what we're all about.
Well, speaking of impact, can you give me an example of a specific project or technology that ARPA E has funded that has directly benefited the American people?
There's one that I'll pick, which is one of our first scale-up awardees, which is called Sila Nanotechnologies. And they're a company that makes batteries work significantly better. And we funded them a long time ago. So 10 years ago, that was even a bigger deal when they were trying to do this. It really was sort of, a moonshot type of a thing. So they are currently building a factory in Washington State to be able to do this. And so that means jobs both in the factory and building the factory, and it means U.S. manufacturing for battery materials, which I think is a really big deal because this is the kind of thing that can go into, EVs. When we talk about how many electric cars that we want on the roads, the better you can make those batteries, the better it's going to be.
So what do you think is the biggest gap in energy research now? What are you really looking for? What's the big hole out there?
There are so many. And I think that's the challenge, is that there's a lot of potential needs that are out there. There's also a lot of places where current technology just needs to be deployed. So it really is identifying those gaps where you can do something that makes a truly transformative difference in what we can do in terms of energy or climate for the country. And sometimes those things are subtle. They're not necessarily obvious.
Like what? Give me some examples.
At the end of the day, it could be something that even involves something like agriculture. We don't usually think of that in terms of energy, but when you think of it in terms of climate, there's all sorts of things that actually act like greenhouse gases. You're trying to get more carbon into the soil. You're trying to make, if you're making biofuels with crops, you have to also consider what's the impact of actually growing those crops. And I think that there's a lot of transformative work that's going to be going on in that space in particular, which you might not normally think of in terms of energy.
So on the other side, what would you say is the biggest challenge for you at the agency?
Agency as a whole, or me myself?
For ARPA E.
For ARPA E. It is getting program directors. It is very challenging to ask people to either quit their jobs or to be on a temporary assignment and come to a place for 3 to 5 years and then leave. It very effectively screens for people that are comfortable with risk. But a lot of people, they're just not at a point in their careers when they can do that. And we are always hiring and we're always growing. And so it's getting those program directors, which is the most important thing to do. And there'll be people that we talk with for 5 years and all of a sudden, this is the perfect time. Now they can come do it. So we always like to get the message out there. If this is the type of thing you see yourself doing, consider a job at ARPA E. You might not think about it, but we're looking for people from all different kinds of technical backgrounds to come to the agency.
Before your government service, you worked in private industry. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if there's any best practices from the private sector that you can bring to ARPA E.
There absolutely are. And one of the strengths of ARPA E is the fact that we have always considered market along with technology from the beginning, but that has strengthened with time. And when you're in industry, you know that you can't separate those two things. If you have technical folks in one silo and market folks in another silo, and they don't talk to each other, you're pretty much guaranteed to fail, in my opinion. The closer you bring those sides together so they both understand what customer needs are and what technical things are possible, then you really start to have something special. And so bringing that further emphasis on market right from the very beginning to the agency is something that I was passionate about, and it's why I joined the agency, because I saw it had that market side. And so, just further, making sure that that's the case has been important to me, and I think it really speaks to the agency's success.
Jennifer, I started by saying ARPA E's been around for 13 years. Has the American taxpayer gotten their bang for the buck from ARPA E for the money that has been put in? What do you think? I
think that's a great question, and we have a whole team that puts together impacts from the agency. Because if you think about it, if you're really far from the market, you're working on the craziest, most difficult new technologies, it's going to be a while before you can go buy them in Home Depot or wherever you like to buy your technologies. So we look at a number of different impact metrics. One of them is follow-on funding, just from the private sector. Not everybody gets that, but let's just say for the folks that do. We've put out about $3 billion as ARPA E, and we've got $10 billion our teams have gotten in follow-on funding, which is separate from things like exit valuations, which is like over $20 billion. So just in that alone, you can see here's technologies that exist now that didn't exist before that are moving forward. But there's also things like publications and patents and companies formed and things like that. So we're very proud of that because, again, we haven't been around for very long.
All right. Well, Jennifer, thanks so much for coming in. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.